everyone. Today we have Joe from the Lightphone team. He's one of the founders of the Lightphone, and he's going to talk to us about so many different things. We have so many questions around, but I wanted to start with mine, or the first question to get us rolling. Make sure to put it in the chat. There's already a Reddit thread that we're bringing some questions from. But Joe, tell us about the Lightphone life in the past 6 months. Like, I mean, you guys have released a massive update and then just small improvements. What has it been like? How's the business doing? And what can we expect in 2024?
Yeah, things have been really picking up momentum. I know we've been sort of tackling some larger, more behind the scenes pieces in the name of optimization and performance. Some of that work takes a lot of time. It's a lot of almost reworking things that were working, but to improve them. So not as much user facing immediate, new bells and whistles, but hopefully we're seeing improvements across the OS, stability, performance, and those things. And that's what the keyboard upgrade, that kind of big upgrade you're alluding to, is really all about. Was, texting has been such a core part of the phone that basically everyone uses. And, we've embraced this kind of e-ink, more intentional texting, but we want it to be as flawless as it can be. If you're spending more time texting than you need to, that's actually not the point. So we're really happy with how that's working. And some of the learnings from that, we might be able to adopt to other screens. Not to, nitpick into that keyboard thing too much out the gate, but really one of the biggest benefits is how it breaks up the lines in a message. And I'm sure anyone who's had a long group message or maybe seen a really crazy spam text with other characters and images, you'll see things overflow in certain ways. And so that should prevent that from ever happening in that compose screen. And, I'd really love to eventually move that to some of the other screens, like the recent conversation history. And then, outside of LightOS, I'm not sure we chatted since we did our PG Lang collaboration, but that was a really great milestone for us. If anyone's not aware, PG Lang is a pretty cool multidisciplinary brand. They make music videos and sign musicians, but it's founded by Kendrick Lamar and his partner Dave Free, who have both really been believers in the project for a couple of years now. And so, this partnership came up really organically. Oh, you have one. I don't even have one. That's funny. It came up really organically. And, I wasn't actually sure how much buzz might be created because, it's not like we reinvented the phone or there's like, a crazy feature, but I just think
the language tool is crazy, Joe. I can ask it questions and it gives me answers, when I shake it. That's amazing.
Yeah. It is a pretty neat little tool, honestly. And I thought that was a fun way to, not do something that was like exclusive. We really don't ever want to do anything that we wouldn't offer to all of our users in any way. And they, obviously.
Here, I'm going to ask it a question that I think everybody is waiting. This is the Lightphone telling us, is the Lightphone 3 coming in 2024? I'm shaking it. Come on, come through. Doesn't want to give me an answer. Is that a question that you guys
that one's banned? Not allowed. Exactly.
It's not allowed. Look, I'm literally shaking it. It's not working. I think it's not allowed. It's not an allowed question, but we'll get to that. But continue. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, I guess it was just really amazing to see, it's, we've been obviously having this conversation with our users and potential users for a while, but it really brought that conversation to a whole new, group of people, and we got Pitchfork picked it up and GQ and some of these other big publications and, partners that we had been in conversations with, it, added momentum to those conversations. And to my surprise, actually, like a lot of existing users reached out super excited about the collaboration, even though, they essentially got no new features. I think it just helped show that, like, maybe we've been a little stagnant in working on some of these bigger, longer term upgrades, but like actually there's a lot of movement and things are growing still. The light ecosystem is not a fading one, but a growing one.
Sorry, the light was distracting me, so I needed to kind of figure it out here. Cool. That's good to hear. I'm really happy that um I'm really happy to hear that you guys have improved a lot of the quality of life, and not you guys focus a lot on features in 2022 and 2023, and that is something that was necessary. But now, you're focusing on more quality of life improvements. Any ones that are, I know you guys just fixed, I saw this response from you. You guys fixed a bug from the GPS tool, and now it's working better, but draining the battery more. So tell us a
Yeah,
little bit
maybe
more
that's a
about
good one to
maybe,
start with.
yeah.
So in general, there's been a few things we've been trying to improve on the GPS front. But stepping back to kind of address that bug, basically what happened is when we launched the directions tool, we added this feature called GPS priming. And the thinking was that, smartphones are so quick to get location when you open a directions tool or something. And that's actually because they're more or less always tracking your location, or at least within the last day. So the phone is the Qualcomm chips or whatever chip they're using
Right.
is very aware of where the satellites are, and that process gets quicker. And we've always told users that are having issues, like once you get one lock, it tends to be much quicker. So we added this priming, hoping to, if someone wanted to kind of improve that efficiency in the background with as minimal battery drainage as possible. And we were seeing nominal battery drain, but also nominal improvements. So we kept kind of increasing the duration of the listening priming in the background. And actually, what we realized in this recent update was that it wasn't priming, and that's why we weren't seeing a battery effect. But actually, for the last year and a half, the GPS priming wasn't working unless the user disabled it and re-enabled that setting. So
Wow.
it was a matter of the toggle not being enabled actually by default,
Right. Gotcha.
though it appeared enabled, which is great news in the sense that since the update, my GPS has been performing much better than ever has. But as I mentioned, because of that, now we're seeing too severe of a battery drain. So
Right.
we've done a lot of testing, and it's actually helped us build some battery testing tools that we can use going forward with each update to more critically see. A lot of our battery testing has been not using software, but actually, setting up phones, tracking different updates and tracking their usage on airplane mode or in different settings. So now we have, much more granular, and that's how we were able to find that this was the cause of battery drainage. Was we could see in those intervals of priming that the battery was draining much more than we thought. And so I think when we get the next Light OS update, we will have a new priming model, which is a little bit more conservative, but still seems to work quite well.
And are you shipping the firmware for the GPS on that update? I know you guys have had that one for a while.
Yeah, I mean, firmware is just tricky in that it affects everything at the core of the phone. So it's just a lot longer of a lead time. And they're technically two different things
Thanks.
altogether.
Right.
So there is a firmware update coming. I just don't want to necessarily confuse the two too much. But for the software update, we have a new priming that will be, I think, a nice middle ground. And the priming itself, it is much stronger when the phone is plugged in. If you're not on a charger, the priming really pulls itself back. So that if you plug it in overnight, the priming will, activate more, a little bit longer durations. And I think that should really, be a nice middle ground. And of course, in the short term or long term, if you are not interested in the priming, you can of course disable that altogether.
Absolutely.
So that's really interesting. Unrelated to that, here, the partner we use for the directions tool, they're upgrading their SDKs, their version of the software. So we've been beta testing our tool. There hasn't been any real changes to the tool, but just to make sure we're not seeing any bugs in making the transition, and that it actually feels like an improvement. But that's something we kind of had to do to stay up to date with them. So that will probably come as well in the next update. And then on the GPS side, we've done actually a few different firmware updates since I've probably been talking about it, because we found one initial improvement that we were able to do the GPS. And then working with Qualcomm, they helped us actually find something else. I don't want to technically talk about what those are, but it has a lot to do, the initial one, with reference libraries that it can pre-download of GPS locations and coordinates, which, will just help speed up that initial priming. And then some other, actual performance-based things that our ODM partner helped us with. So we're still testing those. And there will definitely be a firmware update coming soon. One other piece of the firmware update has to do with Canadian regulations. So some changes we've made to that. We fortunately don't have a timeline yet for Canadian launch. It's still in this back and forth. But one really good thing for all users that's come from that is we now have a test environment for emergency alerts. That was what some of these last regulatory pieces are with regards to Canada. You have to handle these alerts in a very specific way for a phone to be legally, sold through the carrier. But in, addressing those things, we now have much more control. So before, where it felt like we were kind of needle in a haystack trying to help improve these, carrier level notifications, we should be able to reskin them and have much better control over them, so they're not as jarring of an experience.
All right. Let's go to a couple extra questions from the Reddit, which some of you did get to, kind of put them out there the night before. So somebody asks about RCS. Are we getting RCS? I know that a lot of cross compatibility. Is that a possibility for the future? What are your plans on that?
We haven't looked terribly into RCS specifically. I think we've been kind of waiting to see how it gets integrated, either on a carrier level, an Android level, and otherwise. But we've kind of always been watching alternative messaging options. Beeper, I think some people have been following along with some of the Beeper experiments. And, we've been trying and seeing how they're working, as well as obviously Signal is one we've been talking about forever. So I think we're open to it, but there's no tangible plans for RCS at the moment.
Gotcha. Okay, no problem. I mean, hey, just
I think if Apple ends up showing, some real promise and a benefit for all of our users in communicating with their iPhone friends and colleagues, then maybe it would really be worth considering it. But I think at this time, we're not entirely sure what that advantage is. And if someone has a lot of knowledge on RCS, definitely feel free to reach out and share your thoughts, because we're open ears.
Awesome. Another texting experience question: MMS previews. Do you know if we're getting those? Is that possible? Have you guys experimented with some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually probably quite a simple feature to add to the phone itself. In terms of the fact that the photos are sent to the phone. That's how we're able to pass them on in the forwarding to email settings. So we have been working towards it. I would say that in being really conservative, because we've sold this phone to so many people as a phone that intentionally has 0 photos, we want to have a way, especially for parents or others, to lock that feature in a hard way from the dashboard. And I know we've had parents or just even users that want even more precise controls over some of those. So in the last update, we added something called persistent settings, which is probably not terribly exciting to most users. But basically now some of your device settings are stored with your account. And this means that if you log out or factory reset, those settings will be preserved, which is really nice option to have, but it's mostly in preparation for adding some of those settings to the dashboard so that a user can start to actually hard set some settings on the dashboard. And so that's what we're working on now. And I think once we have that, the ability to limit hotspot messaging altogether, maybe a whitelist limitation, I think, being able to toggle off image preview would be a nice thing. But I personally have not found myself needing it, but the last survey showed that a majority of users did find that more useful. And interestingly enough, it has grown marginally with each survey. Like since Indiegogo days, it was like 10% of people wanted to preview images,
Right.
and now it's well over 50. Well, not that much more over 50, but the majority of users for
Yeah.
sure.
So now let's get to a follow-up on that. When is the 2024 survey coming out?
I would say it's kind of been in the brainstorm phase for a while. Like we weren't thinking of it so much as like needs to happen this year, but once we get to a point where we have enough questions, and whether it's a full survey or just maybe like a more specific something we want one answer on, we'll send something out. But right now I'd say like the last survey is still proving incredibly fruitful for us. And it's exciting to go through the survey and to see all the things we've been able to address in the last year, from emojis to, some of these other things.
Awesome. Good to know. Sorry, I'm lowering myself so that in the video we are kind of at the same height.
I got a sick cat on my lap, so I'm kind of in a weird huddle.
One more question from the Reddit, and then we'll move on to questions from here on the YouTube, which always comes up. And of course, it's what everybody wants to know. Is the Light Phone or team, is the Light company planning to launch another product in their line? If yes, what's the key target audience, dates, and those amazing things that everybody wants to know.
Yeah, I mean, definitely anticipated this question as per usual. And I would say that there's been a lot of movement since we last talked, but unfortunately, I'm going to err on the conservative side in terms of what I say about it. We are exploring a new model of the phone. It's not actually a direct replacement of the Light Phone 2, but maybe a more, premium or primary phone use case. It's probably more different in its form factor than it is in terms of its actual functionality. Because a Light Phone is a Light Phone at the end of the day, and there's not too many things that the Light Phone 2 doesn't do in its current state. But we'll be announcing it later this year in much more detail, and I'm really, really so excited. I the surveys that people have filled out, not just the normal questionnaire, but especially the written words. Like Kai and I went through every single one and all the emails over the years, and I think we really found an opportunity to make something special that doesn't exist right now. And I'm so excited to share it. So I want to stop talking about it so I don't say too much. But that being said, I guess I just, I'm sure every company says something like this when they're anticipating a new product, is that like, if you are considering going light, I wouldn't necessarily wait for that. I think the real value is there in the Light Phone 2, and it's still going to be a whiles away before there's another product out and available to own, even if we announce it. So
because you announcing it doesn't mean that it's coming out right away. I mean, like, it's like I think, what was it last time you guys did the crowdfunding campaign? 2018.
It's typically, when we've done it from crowdfunding, it's been 18-month turnaround. But what happens is we haven't actually kicked off when we've done the crowdfunding. We've done some high level research. This time we're in a vastly different position in that if we announce something, we want to be very confident that that's what we can deliver, and be much further along with more concrete timeline, spec, price, etc.
Well, the company has definitely grown since the Light Phone 1 day, so you guys have been able to do more in that. So that's always good to hear. And I do remember, what was it, when the Light Phone 2 came out, there were a lot of expectations, and a lot of the tools that came out. So I've always appreciated that you have always been more on the conservative side, because it could extend to 2025, and you just don't know. I mean, what if we get another major shortage of whatever, and then you're like, oh well, we were planning to release it, but now we're waiting. And it's better to be more conservative and transparent than giving more information and not really show anything for it. So I definitely understand that.
I think what killed us didn't kill us, but the original Light Phone, seeing that 2G was so low power, we did some high level napkin sketches, and we thought maybe it can last 18 days. when we actually got to the R&D, the battery pack that could fit was significantly smaller, and the battery life was more like 2 days. So
Right.
we would, never want to be in a position. Obviously, people could ask for a refund from crowdfunding, et cetera, but we just, we want to be as sure as possible, but we want to be ready and do it right. And I can't wait.
No, that's good. That's good. Well, I mean, we'll have you back whenever you have something to show us, and I'm excited to be able to see that myself. We do have a question from the audience right here. Patricia talks about some things that she would like, but there's one thing that she mentions, and also SMP2 mentions this. They say USB-C port would be great to have on the Light phone, right? Or Light phone 3 with USB-C, Light phone 2 with USB-C. I know this is a more expansive conversation, but talk to us about the Europe reality. Like, hey, Apple had to switch to USB-C, right? Will the Light phone 2 eventually switch to USB-C as well? Is that something that will be possible in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been on our radar for quite some time now. And it does seem like, from our latest understanding, that come 2025, we will no longer be able to sell the Light phone 2 as is in Europe, which is a shame, of course. But as far as we know, that's the plan of attack. But then again, that was what we heard about 2024. So there is the chance that come closer to 2025, that gets delayed again. So we're definitely, kind of keeping an ear out for that. We don't have immediate plans to refresh the Light phone 2 with USB-C, but it's definitely something we've been exploring. I mean, in addition to a new model, refreshing this is, quite a lot of R&D expenses, everyone can imagine. Any future model would definitely have USB-C. I think that's a given. I don't think we'd make any new phone with micro USB. It's, a vastly different landscape than in 2018 when we launched Light phone 2, where, micro USB was still actually more prevalent.
Okay. All right. No, that's good to know. And I think it's very important because you have it's regulation, right? Like, you have to kind of work it out with regulation, and all of those things are quite difficult. Okay, next one is in Zaki asks, hey, would it be possible to use the Light phone in the middle of East Asia, and wherein can we buy locally? So do you have any update on Asian partners, and maybe things that you will kind of talk about for the future?
Yeah, I think when it comes to a lot of countries, just our limitation is that we're super small team based in New York. We don't have teams of people that we can send around the world to test. When we try to get a hold of carriers locally in different countries, we don't necessarily get a lot of attention, or there's prohibitively high cost to get your device certified, which, even if it on paper looks like the phone should work, some carriers in, Canada or Australia or some of these others, limit which phones. So a lot of times when we claim a region isn't compatible, it's again out of that kind of being conservative rather than actually having tried the phone there and had issues. That being said, like, unfortunately, not a lot of movement has happened for a lot of these regions that we don't currently support. And I, would hate to set any sort of like false pretense as if there was like something coming. Like, Canada has been coming for almost a year, it feels like, or maybe even more now. But that's something we've been very active with and, invested in. It's not free to get some of these. So we'd love to make that possible and grow and scale. We've never intentionally locked the phone in any way or capacity. It's not really part of our ethos. We have our optional service plan, but we never want to force someone to use that. It's always making it as accessible as possible. But that's been kind of, a struggle of ours to get that kind of global reach.
Absolutely.
And the
Good.
same issue, I guess, would count for like selling locally. There's just a lot of logistics to be had, and we're always open to it, but I think we're probably overall selling at a scale that isn't probably terribly exciting to these huge distributors that might be able to help us make that happen. But, we're not giving up like we have never before. So
Yeah. Let's go into more compatibility. So, because that's a question that probably will come up in just a little bit, compatibility and international. So I'm updating the notes. So do you think you will have this year for the Canadian release again, fully certified, of course? And also Germany. I think somebody asked for Germany, progress in Germany. I know that the data and text messaging works, but the calls don't. So
yeah, Canada, I mean, I hate saying like ASAP because we keep saying that and it keeps being a moving target, but I mean, it really feels like we're at the very end of a long checklist of things we've had to go through. And so, I mean, I'm hoping that before May, if not, maybe by the end of March,
gotcha.
we're live in Canada. What I'm not so sure is if on day one we'll have an optional light plan available in Canada,
Mm, mm,
or if it will just be a certification with TELUS. I think the latter is really exciting to be able to offer the same price plan we do here seamlessly through our website, obviously backed by TELUS and 100% certified, and that'd be a really great way for us to break into it. But whenever that happens, we are planning a Canadian specific sale just because we know there's been so many users that have been so patiently following up, every few months. And I just think that's so humbling and cool. And I like every time want to be like, it works now, but
yeah.
unfortunately still in the final steps. A lot of it's just regulatory stuff
Yeah.
at this point, unfortunately, just kind of dry.
Understood. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people don't get how difficult it is to bring a phone to market, especially if you wanted to do it in the way that um, it's appropriate or the proper way, right? Like, there's a lot of phones that cut corners in order to bring them to market, not certified through Verizon, but use, other methods in order to get to get it working. But yeah, then those, when you're not certified, then you get into the problem that if they shut you down, then you need to find another workaround instead of having the official partner. So definitely important. Oh, and Germany, did you say anything about that?
Yeah, unfortunately, there hasn't really been much movement in Germany. DT, I think that was the carrier that
Deutsche
they're
Telekom,
using.
yeah.
Yeah, Dutch Telecom. They've kind of been further and further in their responses, us following up and whatnot. So I think for now we've kind of tabled it as they're not really interested at this point. I don't know if it's a
Fair enough.
scale thing and didn't seem to be a technical limitation as far as we could tell. But I
Right.
think, again, it's like we're a small team in New York and they're focused on selling iPhones or something. It seems.
No, I get that. I get that. I mean, that's definitely understandable. And I mean, I think eventually, it'll probably gain more traction. So hopefully in the future you won't have as many issues. Okay, this one comes from Reddit, but somebody put it here. So someone asking already if storage for music would be updated to more than 1 GB. Would that be the case soon?
Yeah, that's been on my personal checklist of things to try because Music Tool is probably the tool I use the most outside of Alarm and the phone. Um, and our thinking is that we were really, again, quite conservative in limiting music to 1 GB because we didn't have a lot of details at the time around storage of each tool, which, as people are probably aware, we do show all that in the device info. And I think a lot of users are feeling like they have extra space on the phone. Messages, even if you're getting a ton of MMS, are pretty lightweight on the light phone. So chances are most users are having enough storage where we could probably extend that to maybe 2 GB. So it's something that could happen quite soon. But I don't want to, it's not going to be a night and day difference. Like it'd probably be 2 GB or maybe a little bit more at most.
Right.
It's not like it can be extended to 128 GB. There is an alternative thing we can also explore, which is probably even a little bit lower on the priorities right now, which would be if you could have songs uploaded to your dashboard that aren't synced locally but are streamed.
Via
So
data.
so then we wouldn't be limited to the phone's hard drive. And like the podcast tool, you'd have some songs that are downloaded for offline use and some songs that aren't. But as you can imagine, if the library gets bigger, the UX might have to expand to support listening to, more songs, whether that's
Right.
like sorting by album or artist or other things. Or right now it's kind of intended to be used as a kind of like single playlist, for better or worse.
Yeah, no, that's understood. It's quite interesting, and I think you mentioned that you're also working on trying to bring playlists. Is that to the music tool, or is that not
I mean,
within the
I would
part?
say it's definitely something we've heard and been tracking the feedback for a while. It seems to be a pretty low priority in the scheme of amount of users we've heard about from it. And I think at the current 1 GB limitation, it doesn't seem like a huge priority just yet. But as we expand, that would be something we'd consider as well. But no, for the short term, we haven't really been looking at a playlist.
No, understood. No, that's fine.
I guess if I were to speak about some of the things we have been working on since the last update a
Sure.
little bit, and this one actually is one we've been working on for quite some time. We just kind of table it when we do an update. Is we actually rewrote a vast majority of the podcast and audio player. From a user perspective, unfortunately, there's not going to be very much. Sorry.
I love the podcast tool, man. It's like my favorite tool. So I'm just like, anytime you rework something around the podcast, I'm just like, yes, please give me better optimization of the tool.
Sorry,
So
kitty
no worries.
cat need to make an appearance. She's in a cone this week. Sorry. So what I was saying is, yeah, we rewrote the audio players, and this was because there was a couple of outlier, albeit quite rare bugs that we just couldn't debug and get to the bottom of. And so by separating out some channels and really getting more precise, creating some logs for our beta users to just track different things, I think we've gotten to it a much stabler place. We've just been really wanting to test it and test it and test it, but hopefully any bugs around like timestamps not saving or saving more than they should, or podcast that's buffering, skipping to the next one when the existing buffering, like we've gotten to the bottom of a lot of those bugs in rewriting this. And so hopefully that's a much more stable, both of those tools stable. We've also rewrote how ringtones and the alerts all work. We call it like, I think, the alert stream or notification stream. And basically, we had two bugs that we had heard from users that we just couldn't replicate for the life of us, which is sometimes you'd have the phone on nothing and it would still ring, which of course is like not good for a light phone that's supposed to be discreet and whatnot, or that someone would call and then the answer UX would not appear. You wouldn't have the triangle and the X and be unable to answer those calls. And obviously both of those are like incredibly critical. And since we were struggling to fix them or find what the issue was, we just decided to dive in and really kind of think from the ground up on those. And those have been working really well. We can't 100% guarantee we fix those, though we're really, really hoping it is, because we can't just replicate them immediately. But we tried our best to look at what possibly could have been causing them and really, really optimize those. So the audio player rewrite, the alert ringer rewrite, that's, I think, going to be really exciting. We're upgrading the calculator tool, which is, overdue for a little bit of love. Some users have really,
they really like your math. Hey,
I mean, that tool was the first tool we released, and I think being so simple, it just kind of fell on the back burner. So we gave it a couple of simple upgrades, and then a new tool that we'll be rolling out is a timer tool.
Ooh, nice.
I don't necessarily have an ETA just yet. It's something we were kind of working on in between things.
Would that be embedded? Would that be embedded on the alarm section, or are you like?
So we decided to ultimately make it its own tool.
Okay.
And keep it so the phone is a la carte in that way. But
Fair enough.
we're definitely deciding if we should group them into one tool, alarm and timer, and maybe even eventually a stopwatch or something, or do them separate. And after talking to enough people and users, I think we felt like it made sense in like how we do all of our tools to separate them.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. That way you're not bundling two things, and like you're keeping it. Hey, if you want a timer, you can add a timer, and if you don't need a timer, you don't need to add something to the phone that's unnecessary. And I've always appreciated that. That is a customized experience for everyone. That every light phone looks different, so that's always good.
The timer tool, it's very simple at a high level. You'd have the option to increase it by minutes and hours, or you can manually type in a more precise time up to seconds. There's not milliseconds. Start the timer. You actually watch the timer go down on e-ink. So far, that has worked better than I thought in terms of the refreshing and the e-ink. I guess because 1 second is enough of an interval. It's not like a clock with milliseconds. It's much trickier. There's no like interval feature, but we could consider some of those in the future. Right now you can only set one timer at a time, unlike how you can set multiple alarms. But I think that'll be a really welcome tool.
That's
and
good.
Some other minor things,
go ahead.
Maybe if you're on the Discord, you might have seen I posted some screenshots.
Yes, I did.
We added to the calendar tool, if you're on the month view, an indicator to show which days of the month have events or not, with a little circle icon underneath. And then, a couple of other minor things with the alert and ringer. There's a new shortcut. It's going to have 7 volumes for the ringer instead of 5.
Nice.
Which is actually what the underlying Android uses.
Right.
So we felt like that might have been one of the reasons that there was some miscommunication. So we just were like, let's keep it identical. And it seems to be working much smoother in that way. Those are probably the biggest ones that I can think of that have been ongoing. Although there's probably a ton of little optimizations like pinning different things if you're on a list, and when you go back and we have a big list of like what we call low hanging fruit that we'll get to, and then there's some like longer term things that are definitely still on our radar, like Bluetooth car pairing, headphone volume between devices. Some people saying it's too loud from the get-go, and other people saying it's too low at the max volume. So really trying to see if we can, similar to that we've rewritten and found improvements in other aspects, get to that. 2FA is one that we keep hearing from users, and there might be something interesting we can do there.
Good.
And then I know it's just one that everyone sort of talks about. We did do a decent amount of Spotify explorations last year.
Ooh, okay.
And we were just curious if we could build our own workaround without, having their full-fledged permissions. And we got a pretty interesting alpha put together where it would play through the Light OS using essentially like a web player in the background of the phone. And that was super exciting because, you'd be able to log in and you'd see just the really simple, like couple of playlists on the phone, and can click and, pause, play, skip, shuffle, etc. But there was a limitation in that because we were using the web player. If you slept the phone, the audio would duck too. And then there was some legal things that we'd have to ask permissions if we were ever to actually ship that as a professional thing. So we've been working, trying to continue to reach out, talk to them to say, hey, look, we can try to make it as simple as possible to work with us if possible. But I guess that's still kind of a waiting game. But I just know people always ask about Spotify, and we have been trying. And
I was going to get to that at some point in time for sure. And for those of you watching maybe in the future, or if you're watching currently, I'm about to put a link where you can go vote for the Spotify team to give Light Phone some API that they can work with. So or they can build something with, support the light phone. There's about 4,000 votes there. So if you go there and continue adding your votes, hey, they'll continue to see that this is something that people want. And I know I always kind of keep tabs on that, so it's quite important. Yeah.
I do think the scale is a little underwhelming to them, even though to me 4,000 seems like so many, and I don't know.
Right, 4,000 people. It's, I mean, it has one of the highest votes in the whole page. Like, with the live ideas, it's not like it's not tracking with some of the other, like top whatever hot ideas or like that people have. It's just that probably,
Well, I don't think most people are actually scanning those pages. If they were to search
yeah.
all of our comments and emails and questions about the amount of people who have asked about Spotify, that might be a much more exciting number.
Yeah, I mean, like for example, on the live ideas and the top ideas is the number 3, so it's kind of like there with HomePod support, which I think that would be very important to them, right? Like, I mean, so yeah, well, maybe, somebody at Spotify will watch
But
the video
we're
at some point
also
in time.
like, not limiting ourselves to Spotify by any means,
Right.
and keeping an open mind for other ones. But in each survey, we have asked that question historically, or just even, tallying inbound inquiries, and Spotify just seems to be the one that most people want.
Yeah.
So that's why I talk about that one most, but it tends to be a similar hurdle with any potential streaming collab.
Absolutely. Let's go to more questions from the chat. This one I'm gonna get into, like, it's not just New York specific, but like any other public events, pop-up events in New York City or other cities coming up, so people can try out the light phone. Talk about that.
I don't know any off the top of my head. We have been brainstorming at the highest level that we want to do something in New York City. Just Kai and I just feel like it's been a while since we have. So it's definitely something that we're always talking about. I think we just need to commit to something and do it. I do know that one of our retailers in California, Dumb Wireless, they do a great job at showing up at different events in the greater Los Angeles area, with a tent and a variety of phones, the light phone or some other, ones that I'm sure you review all the time on your channel. So they've been a great resource to point people. Unfortunately, it's, in that very specific area, to go follow them and check out if they're ever doing an event.
Yeah.
And, it's been a goal of mine to get the phone in more retailers so that there's just more IRL opportunities for people to play with the phone. But it's been a struggle. A lot of it has to do with our margins being, much higher than most products and things like that. And just, phones are a little bit confusing. So a store might be really interested, but they don't know how to train their employees to talk about all of the new. I mean, you can imagine like Verizon employees don't all understand the light phone. How could this bookstore that really loves the idea,
No, I understand that. I mean, I definitely think that's something that people are like, well, it's not a smartphone, I don't know how it works. Like, it's kind of like the same thing that happened when Windows Phone came out. Well, it's Windows Phone, but it's not Android or iPhone. And retailers were confused at the time too about that. There was one question that I wanted to highlight because I know this has been a pain point for a lot of people, and here it is. This is from Spencer, and he says, an occasional problem I have had is getting Wi-Fi calling working on public Wi-Fi that has to log into a website. I'm assuming this will never happen, but would that be a possibility?
It hasn't been a priority of ours, so that's that is true, but it probably is technically possible and something we could definitely consider. It just logging into Wi-Fi tends to not have a ton of value in a lot of cases. If you have an active SIM in the phone and you're out and about, there's not a ton you can do on just Wi-Fi with the phone. I mean, the Wi-Fi calling assist does make sense, definitely, but
Right.
at this time, it's just been such a low request frequency that we hear it that it hasn't been a priority, but we can definitely consider it. I mean, it's just tricky because I'm not exactly sure how we would solve that in a light way without exposing a browser in any, capacity that could be abused. I think that's
Absolutely.
like our fear.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I mean, from a technical standpoint, I would think that the way to do it is connect the Wi-Fi thing with like a WebKit browser. So it's like a super bare bones that can just tap the login, whatever. But I mean, I get your point, right? Like,
But
what
they're
are you going to
all
be?
like a little different. Sometimes they ask you
Yeah,
your room number. Sometimes they want to know this or
right.
like, I
The
don't know.
Gmail, the
My fear
whatever.
is that like it could be a huge slew to try to provide a slight universal solution.
Sure.
That's why people, even iPhones, just pop up their weird browser site,
Yeah,
Marriott or
right,
Airport or whatever it is.
right. No, understood, understood. Cool. Personal question for you, Joe. Jesse says, "What's your cat's name?"
She's the best. Her name is Pia Coconut.
Pia Coconut. Okay, there you go. There you got it. Any question flies here, so just
Yeah,
let us know
no,
with that.
we've
Get
been
me
pretty
updated on
technical this one. Hope it's not too
that.
boring.
I'm trying to update the sorry,
Yeah, I
the
don't actually
timestamp.
see the chat. Am I able to? Oh, oh, cool. Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
that's a
you
bad
probably
thing.
see thousands, now hundreds of messages at that point. Yeah. Okay, Jalokin73. Will we ever get new languages for the light phone? Example Danish. So
And I'm guessing this is in relation to like the entire OS being in
maybe.
another language versus just the keyboard. And so I'll try to answer it in case it's either. But uh, we have done a test and we have built the backend function to translate the OS and how the OS would gather any string of text for a menu item, etc. And so we did actually test that just on a couple of pages with Spanish and French. Those,
Mhm.
if we were to introduce a new language, which it fell a little bit on the back burner recently, so we don't have an exact timeline. Those would probably be the first two languages just based off our survey that were much higher. But the good news is that actually changing, once you get one additional language, adding a second, third, or fourth are pretty easy, assuming that we have the information. And I've already talked to some volunteers. You might be one of them, Jose. Helping us with
I
the
have.
languages. So,
Yeah.
I do have people queued up at least for Spanish and French. And we've mapped out the entire OS notifications. And so we can start that process. But it is a little bit tedious. And, every time we add new features, new menus, that has to be addressed. But it's something we would love to support more. But I would say a more short term, or even another way that we can support other languages is I just know some users want more specific keyboards themselves, like QWERTY being the default English keyboard that we have. And that might be an easier thing to do to support some other keyboards too.
Yeah. Okay.
So short answer is no timeline, but we are hoping to do all of that.
Yeah, no, that's good that you're looking at other languages and probably some changes, minimal, but of course, in the future we may see other things. This one comes up every so often, and I mean, you can answer if you want, and kind of like the cost, right? Like $300. It's been 4 years now, so 4 full years going into my fifth, because I remember getting it quite in the beginning. So is there going to be a budget model or something along those lines, cheapening? I know when I bought it, was it, well, I got the crowdfunding campaign, but was it 349 at the beginning and you guys came to 299, right? So at some point in time in the first year and a half. But is there going to be another discount or budget, or talk about the cost, and why is it that it's
Oh,
$300?
I mean, I think it's actually something super important that we embrace rather than try to scare you away from the cost question. And you're right, actually the phone did cost more, and we were able to, over the pandemic, bring the cost down $50 to $299. But at the same time, since we've launched, even though our scale has grown a little bit, not necessarily in the cell phone sense of what Apple or Samsung might be doing. Our actual base cost has gone up quite a bit for the Light Phone 2. Inflation has been affecting everything, but actually computer chips and some of this pieces of technology that we use were some of the first things to really skyrocket over the pandemic. So we've just been really trying our best to keep offering the phone at $299 and not raise the price. I know some of the other competitor minimal phones are closer to $400 now. And I think they maybe were around our price at one point. So we've been trying our best to do that. But, I guess at large, I'm not really sure where we could cut any corners to make a budget phone unless it were to really start stripping back on some of the technology, or perhaps e-ink or some of the other things. Our cost is over 50% or so of our retail price, and that doesn't include software, which is a pretty hefty ongoing investment. It doesn't include every time you use Here, which we pay for each month, the directions tool, which is supported by Here, or Rev AI, which is how we do the voice to text. And so we pay for those because we want to offer them privately. And, we also don't sell a new model phone every year. So if someone's bought the phone 4 years ago, has been using it, gotten a slew of software updates, been using these tools that cost us money, at a certain point, it's not a great business model, what we've been doing, but it's something we seriously believe in. And I think we want to be transparent about that fact that, a phone costs this much to make. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of phone companies are, offsetting a lot of their cost. I've heard that Google makes essentially no money on their hardware, and it's really about getting software. You to use all of their services across the board. And I saw an interview with the Nothing Phone founder, and I think he broke down their economics very similarly. And it was his attempt to get into the market was to offer it at this price, and then they would raise it, where we always kind of wanted to be sustainable and not have to rely on investments each month or things, and to be let's charge the phone at the price, the cheapest we can offer, but that we know we can at least pay our really small team and keep our lights on and keep the software going, keep the dashboard up, and all of those things.
And that's something that a lot of people don't see, right? It's not just the product that you're paying for, but the updates that people do. And you guys run a business. At the end of the day, you have to turn a certain amount of profit in order to remain viable. Otherwise, this will be your last project. A lot of people are I would rather support over the long term with one-time purchase. And I really appreciate that because, I think very few companies do the subscription in the dumb phone space. But even those that do it, it's not an outsized payment. It's not $9.99 or $15. It's $2-3, especially Sunbeam and one of your competitors. But they don't give the phone for free either. It's not a $100 phone. It's $349 for the Sunbeam F1 Pro, and it's a very good phone, and it gives you value, right? But they're charging because they're updating. The companies that are not updating, they're charging $50 because they just want to sell you the product and never care about you again. So
I mean, we've never really investigated with the goal of making the cheapest possible light phone. I'm sure there's some existing tech or platform that we could leverage in a much different scale, less customizable parts, and we probably could make a cheaper light phone. But I guess the first line of Light Phone 2 is on the website. It's a premium minimal phone. That's always been our goal, is to not compete with flip phones that are going for burner prices, but someone that's maybe coming from an iPhone flagship or Samsung flagship, that this feels as considered. Obviously different scale, and we aren't trying to sell this for $1,000. But find a happy medium that makes sense for us in a light phone. But obviously the lack of tracking, lack of Apple Store or App Store, App Store, or other services, and actually a lot of users do save a lot of money off the cell phone plan, and that's really cool to see too.
Which kind of gets me to a next point in like the network section. I actually going to send people to the US mobile plan that I use. I know you guys have a plan and but I always appreciate that you're not saying like, oh, the only way to use our phone is with the plan that we sell. You're always telling people like, hey, if you want to support us, you can use the plan. But I'm going to include both your plan and US mobile because those are cheaper plans. Like your plan is already cheaper. US mobile is cheaper than that. Like, of course, different scale, different things, different values. But talk to us about this question because a lot of people don't understand why, and you may have a little bit more inside knowledge. But why is there a distinct lack of dumb phones for the Verizon network here in the United States?
I don't know if I have any more insights. I mean, I guess my guess is probably as good as most, but I'm sure it's just not very popular. And a lot of people who have tried flip phones, before maybe coming across Light Phone, always say how disappointed they are and how few feature phone options there are. I think there might only be one model in stores these days, and some stores don't even carry it at all. It was kind of, I haven't been in a Verizon store in quite some time, fortunately, but I mean, I think it's such a niche thing, and I'm sure Verizon doesn't want to sell a $10 phone plan, even though they can. They want to sell you a $95 phone plan with all the bells and whistles that a smartphone might require. So I'm sure it's economics is my best guess.
Yeah. And can you talk to us about the certification process? Because a lot of people don't know how much and how long it takes, which may be another factor that, a lot of other dumb phone manufacturers are trying to get
Oh
their
yeah,
phone certified. Like, walk through us through that.
yeah. Well, the certification. I mean, we are officially certified for Verizon, what they call BYOD, bring your own device. But they don't carry us as a retailed phone in their store. And I'm sure there are other dumb phones that are certified as well. But as far as I know, like Punked or Mudita were not certified.
No, we're not. No.
Uh, there's a lot of factors that make a phone qualified to be certified. We picked a very specific chipset that Verizon was very friendly with and familiar with. But even that being said, and us not reinventing the wheel, we spent six figures probably and a couple of months hiring private labs and going through all these
Oh
dances
my gosh.
and paying things, and that's just for us to let users use their network. We don't make any payback on it, and that's only so we can sell hardware. So AT&T, as you can imagine, was similar process, and with any new product, a similar process. Even potentially a refresh would have to be recertified. That doesn't include the FCC, which has even higher certification costs and testing, or CE in Europe. So a lot of these things, we try not to like, oh, woe is us and pity, but it is really, really not easy for a small team to make a phone. It's just the barrier to entry to make one phone and have it work on any networks is millions of dollars between the R&D of making the phone, licensing from Qualcomm, or we're using Android in this case, or whatever other platform software, and all the way through the certifications and customs, and it's
Yeah. No, understood. And I mean, I do talk to a couple people about this, from time to time, and they say like, "Hey, I want to bring a dumb phone to market," and like, I'm like, "Okay, well, do your user research, do these things," and like they say like, "Do you think Verizon is important?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, Verizon is like essentially for the North American market, but it's expensive, and a lot of people kind of like end up not bringing their product to market because of that." I don't know if you came across this, Joe, but there's a phone maker. There's a lady, Justine. That's her name, Justine, and she's making like a rotary phone,
I've seen something like that. Maybe it's her project or someone
yeah. So
else's,
it's like
but
a project for
so
herself,
cool.
and it's super cool, super crazy. I backed it up, for a pre-order, and she did the thing. Like she actually got it working, but then before sending it, she came across this hurdle, and she's been working with like the certification process, and it takes forever because it's just a hard thing to do that a lot of people don't um don't see, and like it's just like bringing a phone to market is not easy. And if somebody brings it to market really fast, then you need to be asking like, hey, what happened in there that, sometimes they may have a lot of money, granted, sometimes is they know the right people, but asking the questions is always important.
Yeah, I mean, those certification costs that I mentioned, like they're huge for a company like us, but they're probably small change for most cell phone manufacturers that we know the names of,
Yeah. All
And
right.
for a DIY project, it's almost completely prohibitive.
Yes.
T-Mobile does seem to be the most lax in terms of like not
Mhm.
requiring a certification to get on their network. So if you are curious about a DIY phone or uncertified, that's probably the best bet.
Absolutely. One more question that we're getting in from the chat. Make sure to put them in there. So we got Jeffrey. Any progress on texting from the light phone dashboard? Do you have any update for that?
Yeah, I'd say we haven't committed to a path forward, but have been exploring things both from our own proprietary solutions and what those could look like to working with other platforms on a more integrated way, whether it's like a Signal or something else that would, work through the dashboard. There's a lot of technical hurdles in pulling it off. In terms of priorities, I think we all agree at Lightphone it'd be a huge win for us as users, for the users that we hear about. So like, definitely not trying to say it's not top of mind, but it's just really tricky because Apple isn't sending SMS when they created like an iMessage ecosystem. If I'm going to use an example of a comparison, so it's just sending things over internet and data, and so the laptop or iPad or tablet, whatever, all kind of work as the same thing. But for the light phone, this is where everything has to come through the SIM card and through the carrier as a SMS.
Right.
And so the dashboard would have to relay through the phone and then out, which actually is possible, but it's where all the edge cases come in of like, if this isn't getting good internet connection, and how live in real time are we able to show all of those? And it's a little bit ambitious because of all of those. If we were to do it in this kind of like syncing way, we have another idea if we were to offer it through our service plan, but then it would be exclusive to people
your
that were
service
willing
plan.
to pay for our service plan. Plus it'd have to be an additional feature because there's a lot of costs. It would come with some pretty amazing benefits to a quote unquote power user, but we've been a little hesitant. We need to do a little bit more probably research if people would be willing to pay the cost that it might cost for that feature. It's dashboard texting. It's amazing, but would you pay this much or would you pay that much? $5 maybe okay, but if you had to get an unlimited data plan so that the dashboard texting would work with this, and then you have to get the class, like it starts to add up to maybe more than or
Right, more that people will
comparable
be willing to.
comparable to a smartphone plan. But I guess if your light phone is replacing your smartphone, maybe there's people more into it. So I would say it's top of mind. We're just exploring all the ways possible to see what might make the most sense.
I mean, for me, just my use case scenario, I think you should poll this because I think it can be helpful. But I would be willing to go to. I mean, right now I have the U.S. mobile plan with T-Mobile because that's the best coverage in my area, and it's $6. But if I had the ability to do the web texting, yeah, I probably, because I send a lot of text, like so from time to time, I use the Rev AI, like the voice to text a lot because it's easier, and like sometimes I
know
type.
when you text me with Rev AI for sure. You can tell, as I'm sure every user knows.
Yes, I did send a text to Joe, to kind of schedule this, and I'm pretty sure he knew it was with the Rev AI. All the periods kind of give it away. But yeah, if I had a dashboard text tool, I mean, like I think I could go back to like $50 because that convenience feature allows me to text from anywhere, right? And I feel like that will be the use case for me. But I definitely understand that not everybody has that use case, and they're probably fine with like a cheaper plan, Mint Mobile or whatever, US Mobile, light plan, just the basic plan.
There's like another hybrid solution, which would be creating our own messaging platform, which we've also explored, but that has the network effect where
Yes.
if you want a dashboard text, they'd either have to have a light phone or on their iPad, iPhone, Android phone, have our app downloaded, and then we could get around the cost. But I feel like unlike iMessage, where everyone has or like everyone already has WhatsApp or whatever they use.
I get it.
Asking every one of your friends to download a light app just to talk to you seems, I mean, maybe good for light in the long run, but like it seems like too much friction for me at this point. So those are some of the hurdles, but it's definitely top of mind. And the great thing about that is like, as we address something like that, it could apply to this model phone, a future model, those kinds of features are great because it's not, exclusive to any device or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to more questions from the people.
Yeah,
How much you have, by the way? I just don't want to.
I'm good on time.
Okay.
I'll just try to stop talking too much technical.
No, just want to make sure, as always, we usually go for like an hour and a little bit. So, today maybe a little bit more extended, but you just let me know when you have your next thing and we'll stop. No problem. Because a lot of people have come up and asked more questions. So that's a good thing. This one is my personal question as well. And I think Marimba guy right here has a good question because on the podcast tool. So is there any way to have the podcast tool remove things that we already listen to? It's a little clunky to try to keep track of the right now. I agree with this one. I mean, I used a lot of the download function, so that's how I sorted through personally. But have you guys looked into that? So
I would say it's on our short list of podcast tool requests. We kind of keep a running list of upgrades that we could do to any given tool, texting and other parts of the OS as well. And that's definitely one we've heard. We tend to hear more like to show if it's read or unread, which is, listened to or unlistened to, which is probably a little bit easier than deleting them. But in theory, they kind of address the same idea of like wanting to be able to clean out and organize one's podcast tool more. And, we've had some users ask for the ability to more fine-tunedly pick only what episodes from a podcast sync to the light phone from the dashboard, which would be amazing, I think, but also seems a little bit complicated. That's me not technically exploring it deeply with the team, but just, thinking about dashboard UX that could get more complicated. Where on the phone, being able to remove an episode or at least mark it as already listened to, I think that seems totally feasible and probably in like one of the next waves of upgrades to such a tool.
Yeah. Awesome. I would be very, very glad to see that. I think that's the tool I use the most. Like, I mean, I remember when you guys released that, the first thing, I was just like, okay, I can make this my full-time phone with no qualms, no anything. Because I always had to bring like a smart device with me back in the day. Like, I was using the light phone as my main phone and I brought a smart device like all throughout the first part of 2020 until you guys released that. And I was like, yes, finally, I can finally listen to my podcast. So, yeah, but you learn to use it. So.
Our priority with podcasts, and hopefully you'll notice a difference, was getting some of these bugs that some users saw when playing podcasts. Like we're halfway through a podcast, 30 minutes in, usually it would skip to the next episode. And that's like so incredibly annoying that's really what we've been focused on. But then once we get that, it's like, we can keep more refinements. And the good news is like those are actually a lot easier than fixing one of these, bugs.
Major bugs.
Yeah.
Understood. Nick asks more of like a motivational question. It's just like, hey, Joe, thank you to you and your team for the commitment to this device. I imagine this path is a really hard one. What keeps you going motivated?
I'd say it's a combination of the users and the team. I mean, we have like a shared channel between the team that we just write positive feedback. And like, there's at least 3 or 4 notes, if not more, every day, whether it's a comment somewhere or an email. And, we kind of just share them with the team. And like, that really just warms all of our hearts more than, I mean, that sounds so corny and cheesy, but it's like, to know that what we're working on, even though, yeah, we're the underdogs and this hurdle, that hurdle, always kind of like, drowning to some degree, it feels like, or like, you fix one bug and then there's another bug and it feels almost endless or hopeless at times. You realize when you're in that nitty gritty, like, macro stuff, that you step back and you're like, wow, there's thousands, tens of thousands of people out there who have helped improve their own lives because of our idea and our project. And obviously I always try to remind people, it's like, you guys are changing your lives. The phone is just this little catalyst, but like, coming from an art background where I always wanted to change the world, but someone looks at a painting or a collage and they might be inspired, but it might not have the direct, tangible, one-to-one impact that like taking a smartphone out of your life and using this can have. So that motivates me personally. And then, the team, some of our team members have been with us for a bunch of years now, and like they've committed a better part of their, careers to this date to helping bring this vision to life. And like, I want them to see it all the way through and keep the ship afloat for them. And I guess selfishly, like, I don't want to use another phone. So I want to keep the light phone going so that I don't have to
go back
switch to a flip phone. I don't know if a smartphone's on the cards.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe I'll go to like house phone at that point or something.
This question, I think it came up and I missed it. And sorry, guys, sometimes it's a lot. So if I miss your question, make sure to put it towards the bottom. I'm scrolling and trying to get to it. I'm not very familiar with this topic yet because, we just went out of 2G, 3G, but somebody asks about the capability to make a phone call on the NR, which I think is like connected to 5G. So I know it doesn't apply to this version, but are you guys talking about that? Is that something that comes to mind, like new certification?
I'm not familiar with that acronym immediately, the NRSA. I do know that we've like kept an open line of communication in regards to like, is the network that this phone run on going to be continued to be supported? And AT&T and Verizon have given us, many years of commitment that the Light Phone 2 should still work without issue. Granted that's specific to the US and those carriers, but I think they're pretty industry leaders in that regard, or at least it feels like that from here in the US. But any other models, we're definitely considering and exploring, what the benefits or costs, side effects might be of 5G network. And I think as much as possible, even when we made the Light Phone 2, 5 years ago, almost now that we started shipping it, we tried to future-proof it so that I could still be using it in 5 years. And that includes the modems, but also like, GPS to support directions, which we eventually rolled out. And I think, going forward, we just would keep that same attitude of how can we future-proof the phone? How can we make it so that the phone doesn't need to be replaced because of 2G network? Like that was really such a bummer with the original Light Phone being kind of extinct because of the network changing. We really would love to keep making that phone as a third option,
I think.
Hey.
This is the Light Phone 1, I made a short on it. This is now defunct technically here in the United States, but
mine still gets a call every now and then. I'm able to.
Oh, good.
I mean, they claim that there's 0 2G, but
there is some. I know if I take this, I have a park nearby that gets 2G, and that's where I test all of the international phones. And I just go to the park, make a phone call, test, a couple things, but it's hard to get it in my house. So in my house is like almost non-existent. So I definitely understand that. So Paul, I know you were talking about VONR and that kind of stuff. So again, hopefully that kind of gives you an idea. It's not, maybe you guys haven't even heard it from carriers, right? That it's like a requirement for new phones.
I know that we are chatting with carriers in relation to all the future things. I'm not in the weeds of those conversations, but there's a lot of spec sharing back and forth. So it's possible that that's a part of the discussion, but so far there's been no pushback or
Right. VoLTE
yellow,
is still alive and well.
or even like going forward, like, what chips we're looking at. They're like, yeah, these will work for all the certification changes or upgrades that may have taken place in the last 5 years.
Good. Yeah, and it's been 5 years, so cool, awesome. All right, one more question that we have, and I think we have run out of questions. Let me check the Reddit to see if there was anyone right there that posted just in the last hour. But Dale Picker says, how does a weather tool rank on priority list of new features? I'm a 3-year LP2 user, and that is one tool that I've been missing.
Yeah, so it's definitely actually still on our potential future tools, as with a couple of other things we didn't mention. Not to open up a can of worms at the end of this here, but one thing I've been exploring, like, definitely don't take this as a future plans at all. In fact, I'm sort of feeling like it's probably not going to happen, was we did try making our own GPT model on the web to see if we could simplify one enough and restrain it enough to answer, directory and or weather related questions. And there were some interesting things that happened in that, like I was able to get really great weather reports, or translate words or things like that. But that's a whole other kind of can of worms that was its own thing. We explored some platforms that I've used just in like a user hacky way of getting text messages from IFTT weather reports. But I think we would just have to commit to paying for a weather service. And I think we have been hesitant to like want to charge for the feature, but the few options I know we initially explored seemed to be pretty expensive to get the actual, like, whether if we were to build our own native tool. So, we've kind of encouraged users to try these hacks in the meantime. And I think it does make sense for us to create a native weather tool, but there hasn't been a clear path forward for like a reliable weather backend that we can just kind of plug in and use. But in theory, if we found that, it should be a relatively simple tool to show. But I know people want such different degrees of information details on the weather tool that, like, is that enough information for it to actually be useful? How do you want multiple day forecasts, or is it just about today's weather right now? Is that even useful if you can look outside? I feel like forecast is probably more what people are interested in. And so we just haven't really delved into it. Like, I know we did some mocks forever ago, and it was like this super minimal weather app, but I had doubts on how actually useful that would be. Just saying like it's sunny and 83 out. You're like, oh yeah, I can tell. Well, it's definitely not 83 right now here, but so it's like, how much granularity would we need?
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's good to hear that you guys have a little bit of like a initial exploration, and we'll see what it comes with the weather, and all of that stuff.
But no, it's a great reminder, the weather tool, because I feel like that one falls under the radar on these talks. So like, we'll be doing more surveys, and that would definitely be one I'd love to learn about, where and how people feel about the weather tool.
Yeah, understood. A couple ones came in while we were talking. One of them is actually very good. Will the maps ever have the ability to have phone numbers and hours for the directions tool? Is that something that you guys have looked into?
Phone numbers, I can confirm that we explored and ticketed out a way to build that. There seems a pretty easy path to get that information using the existing here infrastructure. I do not know if hours were included in that, but again, not to open up this can of worms, or like definitely not trying to plant a seed as if we were using a GPT, but that was what was interesting, was being able to say, hey, Peter Pan Donuts, what time is it closing? It goes, Peter Pan's open till this time today, tomorrow the hours of this, here's their phone number. And you're like, I can see the utility in such a kind of directory tool that can look things up like that. But I wonder just like how much that might I don't know. I'm getting some ideas now. I'm thinking out loud how we could do that in the directions tool without cluttering it. I think that's our fear, is like if the search results have so much information per thing, but maybe it's like, that's the place I want to go, and you can expand and then see some details. But I don't know what here as the navigation platform offers versus, say like Yelps and Bings and all the other things that a GPT or other, tool might pull from search engine or otherwise.
So when I look at the thing here, right, I just searched for Starbucks, right? So you have the lines of, sorry for the glare, like you have the lines right there that say the address and whatever. I mean, if I tapped on that, I feel like it would be nice to confirm that that's the one that I'm going to, so I can see more details like hours and like that kind of stuff. So I guess like that could be one way of doing that.
Yeah, it's like a thing where it's like some users might find that extra step annoying. Some users might appreciate it. So maybe there's a way to do it with like an ellipsis or like an additional info. And if you click that, you could confirm, or if you just select it. Like for me, I tend to go to like such mom and pop places that there's only one, like Starbucks. I'd probably get 1 million in New York on this. But if I type Peter Pan Donuts, like there's only one Peter Pan Donuts in New York. So
yeah. Oh, that was a real place, Peter Pan Donuts.
Oh yeah, it's great. I'm only thinking of it too because we had some light team members in town, and that's what they missed the most about living here or not living here anymore.
Understood. A couple of last questions here. Will there be a hardware swap out and in, like right to repair? What have you guys done with repairability? That's always a question that comes up every so often. So
yeah, I know. I think we talked about it more on the last one because that was right as we launched our screen repair program. So admittedly, the Light Phone 2 has never been a great phone, like actually all smartphones, for being a very easily repairable phone, primarily because it's glued together and not easily removable without a special heating element that doesn't damage the e-ink screen but allows the thing to remove. We did a lot of testing and we're able to train people and get all of the pieces necessary. So we've been actually repairing a lot of screens for the last few months locally, and we can do some other minor repairs, mostly buttons, but things that involve like damage on the PCB board, damage to the battery, or some of the ports that might need to be soldered or otherwise. That's just not stuff we'd feel comfortable doing in our studio. We've done some testing of it, some promising, but it just not something we'd feel comfortable at this stage. But going forward, that's actually like one of our most definitive stances is, like any future phones or a different model, like can it be the phone that lasts 5 years, 10 years? And so I can't talk about it too much, but I'd just say that that's one of our biggest takeaways from Light Phone 2. We were working on the manufacturing of this, and we were just so, as we talked about how much R&D is limited in our resources, and we're already behind on our schedule, that we just didn't have the time or the luxury to really explore ways to make the phone more repairable. Oftentimes also repairability has the side effects of like, bulkier things, less customizable components. So the aesthetics probably would have sacrificed to some degree. But I think, after we did our carbon offset project, our sustainability report, we realized that repairability would just be one of the biggest ways that we can make an environmental impact. And I think just philosophically, it feels so aligned to like our business model of, not trying to oversell or hidden sell, or, Apple like decreasing batteries on old phones and not telling people and all of those kind of shady things. And just the idea of 1 billion phones going in a landfill every year really doesn't sit well with us. So I love hearing that. I don't think we're going to use it as like the biggest marketing point, because unfortunately I don't think enough people care. But for us, it's a huge one, and it would be amazing if that's the sticky thing that people really gravitate towards. But it's a combination of making the phone more repairable and just like the most premium possible components so that it doesn't break as much as possible. Kind of like thinking at it from both ends. But inevitably, you know, phones, there's things on them that are very vulnerable. If you, like, for instance, if you make it so that you can open up the back of a phone, you can repair the battery easier, but it becomes less water resistant naturally.
Yeah.
And then so, you know, there's like trade-offs, and then like, does water resistance make it last longer, or does, you know, I mean, I think the battery is probably a given, but you know, those are kind of questions where you need to really think through if there's like trade-offs and whatnot.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome, Joe. Thank you very much for your time. No more questions out here. There was one more, and I'll ask that last one, which is, I know you have a timer tool, but somebody was thinking like, hey, can you integrate a meditation tool, you know, for their specific use case scenario? And I'll guess we'll close it with that. And yeah, thanks for your time. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, I guess meditation tool. I know I have notes about it. I don't meditate in that way, so I'm forgetting exactly what it was that the feature they wanted, whether it was a stopwatch that had like an
Right.
interval ding, I think.
Mhm.
I'd say it's on our radar, but like, we're just starting with the super basic timer tool, and whether it's a timer tool that counts down with some sort of interval feature in the future, or a stopwatch tool that counts up with some sort of interval feature, it's definitely possible. Probably not even terribly complex. I'd say like, our thinking around it is just like not wanting to overcomplicate the UX of the tools. But at the same time, we want them to be as useful as possible for users. You know, you shouldn't have to have 5 different things if it's so simple that the light phone could do them well.
Right. We got one more coming in. The last time, this one comes every so often, but Rudy asks, I would love to know how soon we can expect a physical keyboard accessory. Talk to us about that.
Well, we haven't worked on any such thing. I know, like, for our internal development, we have a setting so we can use very specific keyboards to control the phone. But I'm not sure what it would take to make that a user-facing feature that
Or
could be
like
like
a Bluetooth keyboard, you're saying?
something like that. But I did see that someone made an iPhone case at CES that like
Yes.
extended it even further. I mean, you're talking a very long phone then, but I'm curious. I haven't like typed on an actual BlackBerry-esque phone in so long that I wonder if it would actually feel as superior as I remember it to touchscreen.
That's true. That's true. I mean, the tactability just helps throughout. But
I love tactile things. I know Kaiwei, my co-founder, he has so much experience from phones. He's worked on the past with hinges and buttons and these kinds of things, and he's always incredibly hesitant to explore more because he's seen how vulnerable they can be,
yeah,
how expensive they are, how much
yep.
thickness they add. But you know, they had machines that would test touching a button 4 billion times or whatever.
Yep.
And he's like, the hinges and things and springs, they get phones returned because one key was broken. So it's just, he's just like, I don't know if I ever want to go down that route. Not that we never will, but
Right.
it's very complicated. And especially, you know, he was working at Motorola and BlackBerry, and for people with the budgets to get it right.
Yeah.
That would be my fear, is if we
Wow.
did it and didn't do it well enough, you know?
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. That's quite something. Joe, thank you very much. As always, you know, I like to leave you with the final word. Anything you want to say to us? I mean, you know, a lot of people are just hoping for a lot of improvements and stuff like that. And I'm just glad to see that you guys continue to work on this phone and that you will not leave it behind. That's what we got today, which you have reiterated in the past, right? Like, you know, you're creating new ideas and new things, but like your core light phone is still going to be there, which is great. But anything you want to say, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, you know, it might feel at times like we're quieter than usual, but if anything, it feels like there's the most momentum we've had in a really long time. So the morale at the team is really high. We're excited about what the future brings, both in terms of phones and stuff, but also we've had some time where I've been able to work on designing what a new like I hate the word blog, but platform rather, for us to share all these things that we've been making over the years. I think people really loved on the crowdfunding how we showed so much of the process, but that's almost like hidden. You'd have to know where to go and find that stuff. And, I'm sometimes linking it back when people are like, why'd you do this? And I'm like, here's an article. And they're like, that's so cool. So like just trying to bring some of those, or like our marketing campaigns or collaborations. And I think, trying to make it so we have one place on our own website without, we used Medium blog for a while. I've been really disappointed with how it's become a social media-esque of its own.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of hesitant to use that. And I think I've just been craving a platform to do more things that aren't just software updates, that I have more agency to be like, hey, we're thinking about this, or this was our not for everyone per se, but anyone that's listened to me chat for an hour and a half here about features might care about. So I'm really hoping to like elevate that. I know we have the Reddit and the Discord, and I try my best to be on it. I know, Jose, thank you for really spearheading those, but
yeah,
I'm excited to get more hands-on with some of that stuff. And I think once we have the platform, there'll just be a momentum to make even more. And especially ahead of any new products or, these new features, I just want that platform readily available. So there's other things moving, we did some back-end dashboard improvements that, no one's really going to see, but security things as well as optimization things. So, we've been doing a lot of back-end documentation, which isn't terribly exciting, but has made onboarding new team members much more helpful so that we can scale more efficiently as, hopefully we continue to grow. So just trying to really prepare ourselves to have a big year. And, a big future going forward. So, really excited and can't wait to have another live stream about some new exciting things in the future.
Me too. I'm really excited about that too. So we'll talk about more. Well, thank you everyone for showing up and for asking questions even before and now. If you have a friend that, wants to know more about the Light Phone, I'm going to put the link in there. So you guys can check it out. And yeah, I mean, it's just such a good thing. Still, it's been 4 years for me, and a lot of other people have gone strong with it. And thank you, Joe, for releasing that. So I'll put the link there, and if you want to share it, helps the channel, and it also helps people find it. Thanks a lot for coming in today, and we'll see you in the next live stream, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care. Thank you.